Today, I'll discuss why it's so important to get an understanding of benefit elections and make a plan before open enrollment begins. The show notes have a table of contents for this episode. Be sure to follow and subscribe to our email list. The link is in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I hope this episode helps you make some smarter decisions this year.
Welcome to the Enriched Nurse with your host, Dan Richmond. Enrich your personal finances, nursing career, and life.
Speaking of smarter decisions, before we dive in, did you know there's an easier way for nurses to get paid, to get smart with their money in just 3 steps? Check out the Enriched Nurse's accredited nursing CE offerings to choose your path. Get paid to learn and take action to transform your life and finances. Your time is valuable. Nursing school didn't teach you about money, but we will. Every nurse deserves the quality work-life balance and freedom financial well-being can offer. Learn more at enrichednurse.com. Hey everybody, really excited today to talk to you about open enrollment. What's exciting about that? Well, let me tell you. I was picking up my kid from a friend's house the other day, and I was chatting with their parents. They had just kind of casually mentioned like, oh man, the cost of everything's so expensive. And yeah, the cost of everything is pretty darn expensive. It's just crazy how expensive inflation is. I was talking to this couple. One of them's a teacher, one of them's a contractor, tied to federal grants. And there's been some disruption with grants and things like that. Their pay is not nearly as consistent as it was. Meanwhile, their expenses are going up. And so they're talking about how they got like a 3% cost of living adjustment. And they were talking about how this 3% cost of living adjustment, really wasn't covering their expenses and providing much relief for how expensive everything was. The other thing they had mentioned, our health insurance premiums just skyrocketed, which unfortunately, as I'm recording this, is 2025. And yeah, I'm anticipating my health insurance premiums are going to be seeing a big hit and increase because I'm here in Oregon, and Oregon's looking at some massive Medicaid funding losses. And so my friends, they confirmed huge changes to our insurance. And so she had mentioned, I just completed open enrollment, and it's pretty awful. And I was just saying, are you using some of these ways to save money on your taxes and help offset some of these medical expenses and childcare expenses and other things, and using an open enrollment? And she was kind of like, well, it didn't really change anything. Just pretty much kept it all the same. It was just like, here's some ways that I'm decreasing everyday expenses, childcare, health insurance. So I started talking about health savings account, flexible savings accounts, dependent care, flexible spending accounts like childcare, and some of the tax benefits of some of this stuff. I wish I had really better understood this a long time ago, but, with how expensive everything's getting, it's really made me, the last couple of years, be like, oh, I need to really start optimizing, taking advantage of these things. And so I just mentioned, it's like, well, you could save quite a bit of money on taxes by using these other accounts. And they were like, I just went through open enrollment and finalized this stuff. And how do you know about this? Like, how do you know about these things for saving that much money on your taxes and whatnot? I just said, well, that's my business. I'm a nurse financial expert, and I've been optimizing my expenses and benefits for years. And there's always some room for improvement, but I've done a good enough job where I get to work part-time, and I've worked part-time most of my career. That's why I'm able to save tens of thousands of dollars and invest tens of thousands of dollars a year and not have to work a ton and still live well without sacrifice while setting up a great future by investing. And they were just like, oh man, I wish you offered this for teachers because we really need this. Anyways, it got me thinking, open enrollment's coming. Usually at my hospital, it happens in November. I was like, yeah, I should really start encouraging nurses to take advantage because a huge issue. And what was funny is I was like, yeah, most people, they get a job, they got to choose all these benefit elections and whatnot that they don't even really understand. And then they don't change them because it pops up once a year, and you're probably doing the same benefit elections and whatnot that you chose when you first started the job, whether things have changed or not. And even myself, as somebody who's a master at optimizing their finances so I could work as little as possible, still invest and still live well. I mean, I still don't utilize this stuff as well as I could. And I'm still learning things too, because not super simple. So what I really wanted to talk about here is how nurses can make some better decisions in open enrollment, and getting into like the nuts and bolts of these things and talking about a bunch of numbers. And it'll be confusing, and this won't be a very interesting podcast episode. So what I really will focus on is like, what is open enrollment? What are the benefits that you can get from putting in a little time and energy into learning about making better decisions during open enrollment for your benefit elections? And then I'm just going to kind of go through what I've chosen and why I've chosen it and my experience with some of these things, rather than getting into, oh, here's the dollar amount you can contribute to this weird little thing. And then, oh, this is how this particular account works, but not this one. And then just making it a confused, garbled mess. So really, I'm just going to kind of go through and talk about like what decisions I'm making and why I'm doing it, and why you should consider making similar or not taking these decisions lightly, like just keeping whatever you had before. Because one, you can save a lot of money by not paying for things you don't need. Two, you can save a lot of money by insuring against, huge risks. And if you're not getting adequate insurance, you could really get hit pretty hard, and that could cost you a ton of money. People go bankrupt because of medical expenses and things. And a lot of those people, they have medical insurance. It's kind of crazy. And also, a lot of nurses are living paycheck to paycheck. And even ones who aren't, if they lost their income for months, that could be serious. That could put them at serious financial risk. So we'll talk. And then I hate paying taxes. I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay $1 more in taxes than I have to. I mean, I understand taxes are necessary, but I don't want to pay more taxes than I have to. And there's a bunch of ways that you can get tax savings and pay thousands of dollars less in taxes when you understand some of this stuff. And it's like once a year, so it's important to know. One of my ANCC accredited courses is about asset protection, and I go over insurances and whatnot. That's a standalone course. It also has a lot of information about just protecting yourself and your income, your family. It's included in my membership. So my membership gives nurses access to over 40 contact hours, 20 courses, a ton of benefits, ton of information on optimizing and transforming your personal finances, how to invest. But I'm also adding open enrollment specific lessons that are expanding on this asset protection. And so on my website, you can see more about my membership, and you could literally get paid by your employer to learn more about this stuff with your education funds and hours and pay for the membership and really start transforming and optimizing your finances. So you're not like my friend who's just like, oh man, I'm getting totally screwed. Everything's costing more. My income's not keeping up. And being like, oh, I just finalized my benefits. I didn't really know all the particulars of what I was doing. And like, how did you know all this stuff? So that way you can be like, all right, I'm making really smart decisions. I'm offsetting my expenses throughout the year, so I don't have to be stressed out about money. And I'm saving a bunch of money in taxes, and I'm investing in my future. I mean, all win-wins. So, okay, open enrollment. What is open enrollment? So open enrollment happens generally once a year for employees. And the whole point of this, it's related to insurance, because basically insurance companies don't want you, getting like life insurance, right? Like $1 million life insurance policy 24 hours before you die, So it's like, hey, you just got a terminal diagnosis. They don't want you getting like insurance right before. And same thing with medical insurance. You don't want to basically go with the bare minimum kind of coverage and then find out, oh, I'm going to have a ton of medical costs. I better get a better, insurance plan that's going to pay a lot more benefit. That would kind of game the system. And the way insurance works is that, it wouldn't work very well, because the way insurance pencils out is that not everybody uses the insurance at the exact same time. Otherwise, that like bankrupts the insurance agency. So open enrollment gives you a chance to choose your benefit elections for the following year. And some of these things, can be canceled in the meantime, but some of them you're literally choosing them for the next year, and you can't change them unless very specific life events occur. So you're kind of stuck with them. So they're kind of important, and you only get 2 weeks to decide. So the worst thing you can do is wait until open enrollment opens and then get confused and pull up like a 500 summary page document trying to read about what you should get. And then you just wind up going with what you picked last year because that's what you already had. So you want to make smarter, better decisions. You want to understand these things and have a plan for open enrollment before it actually starts, because it's literally only 2 weeks. And then once you choose it, you're probably going to be stuck with it for over a year because you're making them in October, November to start in January of the next year. And then you won't be able to change them again until the following fall. And then they won't go into effect until the January of the next year, right? So, this is important stuff. So before we dive in to what I'm doing and the benefit elections I do and why, so there's 2 ways to look at insurance, 2 overall ways to look at it. So as a way to avoid catastrophic financial risks and losses, and then as a way to insure against pretty minor risks. And so a smart nurse, a smart financial decision for nurses to make is to insure against catastrophic risks, things that could potentially cost you a lot of money, right? And relative to that, it doesn't cost you very much money to insure against it. So like a good example I like to use, because it's pretty simple, is nurse liability insurance, like malpractice insurance. So it costs me like $115, $120 a year to get a nurse malpractice insurance policy, and like for liability if I make a bad decision as a nurse. I can get literally up to $6 million in benefit. So, that's like the maximum amount I can receive from that policy. So $115 for potentially $6 million in benefit. That's a small amount of money, and it's definitely protecting me against potential catastrophic risk, right? Now, if I go to the store and I buy a speaker, let's say I go buy a Bluetooth speaker for like $100, and then I'm offered to buy an extended warranty for that for $20. Well, I'm literally paying $20 for like $100 speaker. So, I'm going to pay $20 for, like $80 in benefit. That's a really good profit margin for the insurance company. And that's a really bad value proposition for me. The most I'm going to get from that $20 is $80. I'm far better, right, to buy insurances that cost me like $100-something or whatever, or like medical insurance, like a couple thousand, few thousand a year for potentially millions in benefit and coverage, right? Or hundreds of thousands of dollars. Getting that extended warranty, or like something minor and small, that's not the point of insurance. Like that's how, you basically get your mindset of like, oh, I hate the idea of this speaker crapping out on me like in a year. And then having to buy another one. So yeah, $20 seems like a good deal. It'll replace it. It's a terrible deal. They like extended warranties and gimmicky insurances make these companies like a ton of money in profits. The profit margins are really good. And so gimmicky stuff, doesn't provide you catastrophic protection. You're better off just to save your money and like put it into a separate savings account and just self-insure the speaker craps out, which it probably won't. It's probably going to be fine. You're just going to lose that $20. You're better off just keeping the $20, putting it somewhere else. And then if, something like that craps out, then you just replace it with that money. But with insurance, medical insurance, life insurance, things of that nature, you want to insure against catastrophic risk. And so the way that can still be affordable is, like that nurse malpractice insurance. So there's only several hundred or so nurses, I think, actually needing to use that a year. So if they have thousands and thousands or even millions of nurses paying like these premiums, right, and then a much lower percentage of the nurses are actually using them, that lets them provide, potentially millions of dollars in coverage when needed for a small amount of people. And it also allows a large amount of nurses, right, to pay a relatively affordable small premium for that. So that's a pretty good deal. So that's how insurers make money. They either have really high profit margins on something that you're very unlikely to get a benefit from. And if you do, it's a small amount of money and you're paying a high premium for it. Or you're paying a relatively low premium for a potential high amount of money. But mathematically, it's unlikely the insurer's going to pay out like more money than it's taking in from a large group of people. So the volume's high enough that they can afford to pay out a lot of money because they're taking in premiums from a bunch of people who aren't going to need it, just statistically. So that's kind of how insurance works and what the point is. So you want to be aware of that when you're looking at these things, especially in open enrollment. You want to consider, is this gimmicky? Do I really need this? Is it just going to cost me money and I'm not even going to use it? And then also make sure, you're not skimping on the important stuff. And then, you can probably skip the things that are gimmicky and don't provide that great of a value proposition. And I go more in depth in that asset protection course. That's also included with my membership, which is a sweet deal. You could save hundreds of dollars on courses and get a ton of value on getting your finances in order. Okay, so let's move on to the tax savings. So this is really where it's a huge improvement for open enrollment. So I'm making investments, so I use like a health savings account. So literally for each $1,000 that I'm investing in my health savings account, I'm saving 40% of my taxes. So for each $1,000, I'm paying $400 less in taxes. So that's pretty sweet. And then the other cool thing about this health savings account that I'm in is I can use that money to pay for medical expenses. And there's multiple ways to do this where you can literally save money on your taxes and still potentially use the money that you're saving. You can use it for specific expenses. And so that is a huge benefit. This year, I'm going to put over $8,000 into a health savings account. 8 times $400, I'm literally saving $3,200 on my taxes. And I've got $8,000 I can spend on medical stuff. So that's pretty cool. I'll get into that a little bit more. And there's multiple ways that you can do that to potentially save on tax savings and have, essentially like emergency savings set aside for either childcare, medical expenses, dental expenses, vision expenses, things of that nature. The other benefit is asset protection. So we talked about insurances. So again, catastrophic asset protection. So, you don't want to get sick or have some kind of issue and have medical bills pile up where you've got creditors going after your car or your house or garnishing your wages, right? So that's what insurance is for, is protecting against catastrophic risks and issues. And then the other thing is income protection. So most people can't afford to just stop earning money, right? A lot of nurses are paycheck to paycheck. Even if you've got a few months saved up of expenses and you've got some savings and investments, losing your income, you can burn through a few months or so pretty quickly, like especially if you're used to making like 10 grand a month as a nurse or even 5 grand, right? And then all of a sudden that's gone. 5 grand a month can go pretty fast, especially if you have a bunch of additional expenses you weren't anticipating because like you got injured and you can't work. So income protection is another thing that comes up in open enrollment, and it's important to take a look at it. All right, so let's go through my list. In order to use that health savings account I was talking about, where you can invest over $8,000 and have it invested in like the stock market so it can go up in value, you have to be in what's called a high deductible plan. So I'm in a health savings account medical plan, which is considered a high deductible. That means my deductible is like $3,100 for my family and I, and I'm paying about $90 per paycheck for this coverage. And I anticipate this is going to go up quite a bit this year. But that lets me use that health savings account. I still get preventive care and whatnot. The other option would be the standard medical plan account. And that usually comes up with what's called a health reimbursement account. My employer gives us $1,400 to help offset that deductible. And so you can get that like regardless of which medical plan you're on. The difference is the health savings account, I'm able to take that money with me if I quit my job. The health reimbursement account that the employer is putting that money in, like if you're like me when I was younger and you'd never go to the doctor, you could have quite a bit of money built up in that health reimbursement account. And if you don't use it, you don't get to keep it. You don't get to take it with you. The employer will just keep it and you'll lose it. That's the other nice thing. The other medical plan, the non-deductible medical plan, usually it costs a little bit more, but it's also going to pay more stuff out. So the deductible is a little bit lower on that. And it definitely pays for more stuff like $20 doctor's visits and things like that. So that's the downside to being on one of those high deductible medical plans. So understand the difference between those and then make sure you can afford the higher deductible, whichever route you're going to go. And then keep in mind health reimbursement account, health savings account, different things. There's also what's called a medical flexible spending account, or FSA. Those are different. Those can get you some tax benefits. You can use those in conjunction with a health reimbursement account. There's some additional rules involved, which I'll get into a little bit more later. But again, this is something I cover in my lessons within my membership. I also have some information on my blog. Links are in the show notes. And your employer. I'm sure your employer has information kind of explaining the differences between these three accounts, the health reimbursement account, the health savings account, and the flexible spending account. All of these are ways that you can offset medical expenses and a benefit that you can, pay for doctor's visits, medical supplies, things like that. And then the health savings account and the flexible spending account can save you money on taxes. And there's definitely some big differences between the health savings account and the flexible spending account, which I'll get into a little bit later here. So medical care, that's what I'm doing. I got my family on. My wife and I are both nurses. Just a side note, my wife works per diem, so we don't both need benefits. She's on my health insurance. She also works as a nurse. She gets 15% higher pay being a per diem nurse. That's kind of nice. So good idea for nurse couples to consider that if one of them's getting benefits and has the other on their plan, that might pencil out and be more financially valuable to you than you both having benefits. Just depends on your situation. The next thing is dental. Yeah, I'm getting the standard dentist plan. Usually with dental plans, there's an orthopedic version. They have a max payout. Dental is kind of a weird type of insurance. Sometimes I wonder how great of a deal it really is. But anyways, if you're thinking you're going to need braces or orthodontic type care, then you need to make sure you're on the right plan, because the one I'm on excludes orthodontics. In the past, we had one that's more expensive that included orthodontics. And so usually we try to kind of plan, are we going to need braces or these kind of things? And if you're thinking your kids might need stuff like that, or you or your significant other, then make sure you get the plan that pays more and includes some of these additional things. Vision, I don't get vision. But what's interesting is medical insurance usually will cover disease issues for vision, but they won't cover eye exams for getting reading glasses or certain things. So make sure you understand the vision benefits. I've never needed it, so I don't carry it. And you can still see a ophthalmologist through your medical insurance, but it'll pay for some things, won't pay for others. My daughter needed eye surgery. She was able to get the eye surgery under our medical insurance. The vision insurance wouldn't have done anything. So make sure you understand the differences between medical, dental, and vision, and get what you need and skip what you don't need. All right, let's talk a little bit more about the health savings account. So like I said, you got to be on a high deductible medical plan. So that's the main downside. The main benefit is you can potentially save as a couple thousands of dollars. Even an individual can save around $4,000 into a special tax-advantaged investment account called the health savings account. Man, I wish when I was a younger, newer nurse, the smart way to have done this would have been when I never went to the doctor, when I was 22 years old working as a nurse, when I had no medical costs whatsoever, and I don't even think I had to pay medical premiums. What I should have been doing was a high deductible plan. It would have cost me no money in medical premiums, almost never would have gone to the doctor, and then I could have been saving thousands of dollars into this health savings account. And literally, now that I'm 40, 20 years later, I would have been able to have well over $100,000 in this health savings account. And now that I got a family of 4, and my body's a little creakier than it used to be. I mean, you can use these accounts to pay for chiropractic adjustments, massages potentially, all kinds of medical products, doctor's visits, co-insurances, deductibles. Now that I got 2 little kids, the potential for us to have to go see the doctor or go to the ER for abdominal pain at midnight, the potential for those kind of things are a lot higher. And having an investment account with a ton of money in it sure would be nice. I mean, the reason we didn't get one for a long time was because we knew we were going to have kids, so it made more sense to be on a medical plan that actually paid for stuff, because we had known medical costs. Plus, we had a fair amount of money built up from those $1,400 health reimbursement account incentives like I was talking about that my employer gives us. So we had several $1,000s in an account anyways, but by the time we had both of our kids, we'd pretty much wiped out all that money and didn't have any. And so that's when I was like, well, this sucks paying out of pocket for medical things, right? Because we had a year, 2 or 3 years ago, where our daughter had surgery. I had a bunch of stupid issues. And then it seemed like we went to the doctor more than we'd ever gone before. And like I said, we had quite a bit of out-of-pocket costs, even with health insurance, because even with the regular health insurance, the deductible is still $1,200. And so that's where I was just kind of like, all right, I need to figure this out because I don't like paying for medical expenses on my after-tax dollars, right? And so that's the benefit of these accounts. You can put the money into them before you pay taxes. So for me, it's like 40 cents on the dollar I save. So literally, I'm putting $1 in to this account. I can invest it so it can grow in value. I don't pay taxes on that dollar. I can use that dollar to pay for medical expenses. If I don't use it at all, it stays in the account and it grows tax-free. Compounding over decades, these things could be worth a ton of money. And that's what I mean. It's like, God, if I were smart and if I had known better, I would have been using this account when I had no medical expenses and just built up a ton of money in it and invested in it. Literally, it'd be like worth over $100,000, which would be really nice to have at a later point in life when you're more likely to have medical expenses, like where I'm at now. And the way I'm looking at it is like, well, shoot, my wife and I will have been nurses for decades. We're in our 40s, we got kids. So there's a good chance we're going to have more medical expenses going forward. I've been using the HSA and I've already got almost $18,000 into it because I've been using it for about 2 years now. That's pretty cool. I'm saving a lot of money on my taxes and I'm building up an account that I can potentially use for medical expenses if I want, or I can just let that money grow tax-free and invested and use it when I'm in my 50s or something. You can also save receipts, which is kind of interesting. I'm not saving paper receipts, but I mean, you can save your PDF invoices on a flash drive or something or on your computer, send them to your email, and then you can potentially get reimbursed years later. So the HSA is pretty cool. Definitely tons of tax benefits. And like I said, the smart way to do it, I think, is use it early in your career where you don't have a lot of medical expenses, and then be on a medical plan that's not the high deductible plan when you're actually needing to use a lot of medical insurance. And you can use the HSA to help offset the cost still later in life. The other one, flexible spending account, I've used these a little bit. I was never that thrilled on them. They can still save you on your Social Security taxes. You don't have to pay federal tax on the money that you put into it, and you don't have to pay state tax. And like I said, for me, that's about 40% tax savings. Gives me $1 to spend on medical care versus 60 cents if I were to use my after-tax dollars. The reason I didn't really use these for a long time is because I use it or lose it. So I've never really had predictable medical expenses. And I don't like the idea of putting $2,000 or $3,000 into an account. Because like what the limits are, they're like $3,000 a year. I've never liked the idea of putting a few $1,000s into an account that I may not even get a benefit from. Because the FSA, the flexible spending account, you use it for healthcare medical expenses, very similar to the health savings account, with a very big exception. If you quit your job, you lose the money. If you get fired, you lose the money. If you don't have any medical expenses and you miss the deadlines, you lose the money. So you still get to keep the tax benefits, but obviously you're not getting $3,000 of tax benefits if you don't have $3,000 of medical expenses. So that's a net loss. So I never really liked that. I think it's a no-brainer. If you always have thousands of dollars in medical expenses and it's just like 110% guaranteed you're going to use it, then it's a total no-brainer. Also, the higher your federal income tax rate is, you can save a lot more than 40%. I'm talking about for me because my federal tax rate's about 22%. But if you're higher than that, it could save you a ton of money. So it's a really smart thing to do in that sense. But it does have some quirks, so definitely understand it and make sure you understand the deadlines. And most importantly, that you're probably going to have some expenses. One thing, like knowing what I know now, I probably would have used this more in the past, even with that health reimbursement account. And the way I would have used it is I would have intentionally put money in there and planned to use it for chiropractor adjustments, knowing that like a chiropractor adjustment is going to cost me like $75 each time I go in or whatever. And then also accounting for like a massage. So once a month, I could go get a massage or a chiropractor. I'm putting like $2,000 into it. You can roll over. I think it's like $600 something dollars. You don't lose all of it. But if you haven't spent more than $600 something dollars, it's not going to roll over. I don't remember the exact amount off the top of my head. That's how I would use it now. And even if you don't have predictable medical expenses, if you want to start getting massages, chiropractic adjustments, acupuncture treatments, and you don't want to go through your insurance even, you could do those things and it would help with your health and well-being as a nurse too. and you would still save some money on taxes and then have a good reason to go actually pay for those things, get them done, especially if your money is tight and you feel like you don't have enough money to splurge on those kinds of things. That could be really nice. The other thing I started using was a dependent care flexible spending account. So long story short, I invest a ton of money using tax-advantaged retirement accounts. So my tax liability is normally close to zero. Like, I get my effective tax rates really low. And so that qualifies me for an Oregon, or it used to qualify me for an Oregon dependent care credit. So I could never really figure out if using a flexible spending account for childcare expenses was really worth it to me, because I felt like, the tax benefit it was too hard to figure out. So here's why I'm now using the dependent care flexible spending account. My income's a lot higher, so I no longer qualify for the Oregon tax credit, but again, 40%. So I'm in a 22% federal tax bracket. I pay 10% to the state of Oregon, pay like 7.5% Social Security, Medicare taxes. That's 40%. So I use the dependent care flexible spending account. I'm getting $1,000 in tax savings, and I'm paying for after school care for my kids, a mountain bike specialty aftercare program because you can use it for even sports, and my daughter's gymnastics through the YMCA as an after school program, and Boys and Girls Club. Like my childcare costs, I'm saving money on taxes, and I'm using this money to pay for my childcare. It's pretty easy to use, so I've been using it the last couple of years. So I've found I can do it while I'm at work electronically. I submit receipts. The money is in my account. A couple days later, it's pretty easy to get the reimbursement from it. The money is easier to use. Even if you quit your job, you have till the end of the year to use it. There's a grace period into the following year of like 2 or 3 months. So you can still use the funds. So it's way less risky. So, if you have known childcare expenses, then this account can save you thousands on your taxes and help offset, some of that stress from like rising costs and whatnot. And like I said, so the main thing with the dependent care flexible spending account, the test is whether or not you can use it for childcare expenses are you using it to allow yourself to look for work or actually go to work? So, they call out like dance lessons. So you can't use it to pay for dance lessons or piano lessons. You potentially could through a qualifying provider if it's allowing you to go to work. So the way I look at it is after school program, and I submitted receipts for this mountain biking program and gymnastics, and I got reimbursed for it. So I'm like, sweet, next year I'm putting more money into this thing for gymnastics, the mountain bike program, and my other after school programs for my kids' Boys and Girls Club and like the summer camps. I'm going to put probably $3,000 into it because that's about what my overall expenses will be. That's going to save me, $1,200 on my taxes. And I'm going to be able to request reimbursement just while I'm on the clock at work, during downtime, because it's an employer benefit. I can access it through my employer benefit system. We use Health Equity, and I found it's super easy and fast to just upload a receipt and get a reimbursement. And like I said, I've confirmed I'm getting reimbursed for this after-school mountain bike program and potentially even like skiing, although skiing one's on the weekend, so I doubt I could get that. But specialty sports programs can count. The other thing you can use it for is adult daycare. If you have a loved one or a parent or somebody who has disability or has Alzheimer's and needs adult supervision, you can also offset your taxes and use it for that. Pretty good deal, pretty good way to create a little side account to cover a specific set of expenses and save a ton of money on your taxes. So it's way easier to pay for childcare when you're saving 40 cents on the dollar than, when you're basically trying to pay for that same care and taxes at the same time. And that's how I'm using it. Check all these things out. Good ways to save you money. And let's move on to the next one. So next thing on mine, let's talk about life insurances. So this is an area where I frequently see nurses, and that was what was kind of funny is my friend mentioned, she was like, oh, I did increase my life insurance a little bit. You probably should increase your life insurance a lot. So basically, you don't need life insurance if you don't have any dependents. So if you don't have a family, if nobody's depending on you for money, if you don't want to leave anybody a ton of money, if nobody's depending on your income, then you really don't need life insurance. And your employer probably has basic life. So I have basic life insurance that my employer provides for free. Mine's twice my base pay, so it's $210,000. My employer pays for that. So, that's a decent amount of money. But I have a family, and I'm only 40, and I've got a lot more working years. So that's potentially millions of dollars worth of future income, right? So it would be a huge mistake for me to only carry that base life insurance if I want my dependents and my wife, if they lose my income, to be okay. So I also use supplemental life insurance, and I pay for the max. So that adds another $735,000. And I'm paying about $40 per month for this. And so that's pretty good premium for a 40-year-old. Usually your group life insurance through your employer is going to be a pretty good deal. The main downside to only having life insurance through your employer is if you quit your job, you no longer have that life insurance. But either way, these are examples of term life insurance, which lets you insure for large amounts of money with pretty low monthly cost. So, I mean, I'm literally getting $945,000 in life insurance for $40 a month through my employer. I also have a separate policy outside of work, which adds some more to that. So that way I still have coverage. And one way I would look at this is how much of an income loss. So the way I'm looking at it, I'm just maxing it because basically if I die, I want my wife to be able to pay off her house, and I want her to be able to go years without having to work or be stressed out about money, and cover childcare. Because, it's like, what the heck would your partner do? All of a sudden it's like you got one person, you got dependents, and, obviously there's a time commitment. Who watches your kids at work? Who gets them ready for school, or a loved one or a partner, who takes care of them. So life insurance is really important if you have people who depend on you. And so same thing, like I carry spousal life insurance. Like I said, my wife's per diem nurse. She's not getting benefits. So we pay for her to have $250,000 as a supplemental spouse life insurance. And this could be a good idea for nurses too, especially if you have a stay-at-home spouse. Because again, how the heck are you going to work full-time and pick up extra shifts if your spouse dies, right? And now you don't have anybody to help out with the things at home, or, what they were doing, not having a job. Or if they work at a job where they don't have as good of benefits, it might be worth getting spouse life insurance. So we're maxing that as well. I'm paying basically $24 a month for $250,000 for my wife to have life insurance. I don't pay for kids' life insurance. I don't think that's necessary. So voluntary accidental death and dismemberment. So this is one of those things where, again, if you don't have any dependents, you probably don't need it. These are kind of interesting. They're kind of weird policies. So literally within these policies, it'll be like if your arm gets chopped off, your arm's worth this much money, or if you become a paraplegic. So there is benefits to you potentially. If you get in a bad accident and say you don't die, but you're pretty jacked up afterwards, this could definitely help with medical care. So I carry it because, I've carried it since my wife and I we're not that old. Dying from an accident is a significant risk for us. And that helps kind of amplify and supplement those life insurance. What you probably don't want to do is have low life insurance and high accidental death and dismemberment. Some financial experts will say, skip AD&D. It's a bad deal, because you're not likely to benefit from it. And so I've been maxing mine at $1 million. The premium's getting kind of high. It's like $8 a pay period, so $16 a month. I have quite a bit of life insurance. I have other assets. I'm probably going to drop how much I'm paying in AD&D and decrease the amount. But, we'll see. It just kind of depends on my overall benefit costs. But for quite a while, I've been maxing it out, which adds another $1 million. But it only pays out if I get in an accident and either die or lose a limb or something. And then I'm paying for the spousal one as well for accidental death and dismemberment, or AD&D, which is $500,000. There's the one for kids. We do a lot of skiing, snow sports, mountain biking, a lot of surfing. We do a lot of activities, that carry some risk. For a $20,000 policy for my kids, it's 16 cents. So 16 cents is no money a year. So I just go ahead and carry that. It's extremely unlikely to even need it. What I wouldn't do is think, I got $1 million AD&D policy. The life insurance is more important to have that. It's going to cover much more. There's much more ways to die and have that policy pay out, whereas accidental death and dismemberment is only going to be an accident. It's going to be pretty restricted. Next up, we'll talk about income. like insurance for your income, basically. So there's two ways to look at this. There's short-term disability benefits, which generally are kind of expensive. And then there's long-term disability, which tends to not be quite as expensive, but it pays, until you qualify for Social Security disability, or it pays for a longer period. So short-term disability benefits usually only going to cover you for like several weeks up to a maximum of 6 months. The premiums tend to be kind of expensive per month. I never paid for this. I always felt like I was better off to save like the few $100 a month I would be paying for this benefit and then just save that. If you're literally straight paycheck to paycheck and you cannot figure out how to save up, several $1,000s to cover like a 1 or 2 month income hit, then it might make sense for you to have short-term disability. The downside is, like I said, it's kind of expensive. Usually has a 7 to 14 day waiting period. So what that means is, like, say you break your arm, it's not gonna pay for like the first week or two, and you can even choose, I think, up to like 30 days. So, most common injuries that would prevent you from working, for like 2 to 6 weeks at work, the thing's not even gonna pay out very much if your waiting period's really long. And so that's the thing. It's like a lot of injuries, are rooted out after a week or two. It's like a gimmicky thing. I remember it was kind of gimmicky for pregnancy. Like they won't cover a pre-existing condition. So if you're thinking you're going to get pregnant and want to get like a 6-week pregnancy disability benefit, which depending on how long you wait for it to kick in, like 1 week, 2 week, you might not even get very much money from it. I always thought it was just way too gimmicky. You can't be pregnant and then get short-term disability because it won't cover a pre-existing condition. So you would have to have it in place, then get pregnant, and then be able to use it like literally 9 months later. I don't think it's that great of a deal. That's why I've never carried it. If my employer were going to pay for it or heavily subsidize it, it'd probably be a good deal. You can get short-term disability as a private benefit on the side, so you could get it outside of open enrollment too. So it's not like you have to have it. In Oregon, we actually have a paid family leave in the state of Oregon, and my employer also provides a short-term disability benefit. So it's really become a non-issue. So now I can get, 100% of my pay covered after a week for up to 2 months, and then, like 60% or something for up to 6 months. And part of that's my employer, part of that's my state benefit. Long-term disability is pretty important, though. I used to pay for this. My employer pays the premium in full. But basically, after 6 months, if I'm no longer able to work as a nurse because of a long-term disability, I would get 60% of my compensation. So I'm making around $100,000. I'd get $60,000 potentially for decades in disability. So that's pretty important. And again, that meets our criteria of catastrophic. So if I have a catastrophic disability that's preventing me from being able to work, this is going to get me 60%. So it's not 100% wage replacement. I don't think you can actually get, pay for a long-term. It'd be really expensive to get a significantly higher one. You can pay, like I could be paying more for a 3-month waiting period. So basically this long-term disability thing would start paying after 3 months. And I could also pay to increase it to 66%. Again, I'm just looking at catastrophic. So 60%, 6-month waiting period. I can definitely go 6 months. Like I keep quite a few assets and savings outside of my insurances. So that gives me the ability to just go with the one my employer does for free. And I don't have to pay out of pocket. So it saves me some money. So it's kind of nice. And like I said, 6 months, 60% is plenty. I've never felt like the additional value from like a 66% policy after 3 months or, 6 months was worth paying extra for. So that's just me. You got to look at your financial situation and see what's right for you. And so that brings us to the kind of potentially gimmicky benefit things. My facility, this includes things like critical illness, accident insurance, legal protection or insurance, identity protection, and then pet insurance. And so these are really going to depend on the person and what's important to you in your specific situation. So I don't carry the critical illness. So what that is it's basically like you're paying an amount each month for a lump sum of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. And basically, it'll only pay out if you wind up in the hospital or with a specific illness. So it doesn't cover everything and every reason. So from what I've found, the research I did on these is they're pretty big. Like they make insurers a lot of money because people wind up not using them. Basically, you're paying a monthly premium for a lump sum if you get cancer, if you have a heart attack, if you have a stroke, if you have Alzheimer's disease. There's like a bunch of conditions that you can potentially get 100% of the benefit. And then there's like several that'll pay 100%, kind of the major ones like coronary artery bypass, kidney failure, these serious medical issues, right? That, happen to people, but not everybody. And then it says 16 other ones that'll pay 25% of the benefit amount. So basically, if you elected that $20,000 coverage and, you get like a type of cancer that's not as bad as the one that they'll pay 100%, you only get 25%, which, would be like, what, $5,000? So you think you're paying for a $20,000 benefit. Turns out you get $5,000 lump sum. But I mean, you're pretty unlikely to probably even use it, honestly. I haven't carried this one. And again, I would consider how much is this costing me and what kind of value am I potentially getting from it? And so one of the examples they list to give you an idea of how much this costs is basically depending on your age and how many people you're insuring in your household, you pay anywhere from 15 cents to $5 per $1,000 of coverage. And if you're a smoker, it's a lot more expensive. The example given on MetLife's website is basically a 57-year-old, wants $20,000 of critical illness for their family. It's going to cost them $66 per month. So that's pretty expensive for a cap of coverage, right? That you're not real likely to benefit from. And if you're a smoker, it's even higher than that. And maybe you're more likely to need it if you're a smoker, but that's why they're charging you a lot more too. That same person at 57 would be paying almost $6, almost twice as much. So it'd be like 120 something a month for the same amount of coverage if they're a smoker. I would look at the value proposition there, because the way these things work is you get a condition that you're unlikely to get, it'll pay out. And then meanwhile, they're collecting these kind of big premiums from millions of people who will never actually use it. So the one interesting thing about it is there is a health benefit premium. So basically, if you get a wellness check or you go see a dentist or you see like a doctor, they'll pay you $50. It's called the screening benefit. And this is true for the accident insurance too, which the accident insurance is a little different. It's definitely cheaper. I'm paying $6 a paycheck or $12 a month for my whole family. And the accident benefit is different. It's like if you break an ankle, break a bone, or, get hurt doing something, there's dollar amounts that they'll pay for each of these potential things that can happen and certain types of visits and whatnot. But with both of these types of plans, this critical illness and accident thing, there's what's called a health screening benefit. And it's $50 per person per year. So, if it's going to cost you like $200 or $300 a year and you're insuring 4 to 6 people, like as a family, well, if you go to the dentist or you're going to do your wellness exam each year, well, for 4 people, that's $200 right there. So, that screening benefit might just cover the cost of the policy. So that might make a little more sense to get. So with the accident insurance, what's kind of interesting with that is it's costing me, what did I say, $12 a month? So it's basically $144 a year, but I'm insuring 4 people. So at work, I can literally upload this, my kids went to the dentist, my wife and I saw the doctor. And it's pretty easy. We upload the receipts or the visit, and then they give us $50. So the downside is if you forget to do it, you won't get it. I was like, I should do this episode on open enrollment. I was like, I need to upload for my health screening benefit because my kids were at the dentist a while ago, and I forgot to upload to request the $50 for the screening benefit. And there's a list of a bunch of stuff you can do to get the screening benefit, even just getting like some lab work done. $200. And I'm only paying $144. So right there, I'm actually making a little money off of this. It's not a lot of money, but I did have some experience actually using this in the spring. We always get season passes to the local ski mountain, and we ski and snowboard a lot. And my daughter was jumping in the living room and then jumped up and twisted her ankle pretty bad. And with kids, it's hard to tell how bad something is. So waited a couple days, seemed like it got a little bit better, and seemed like she was able to ski okay. It wasn't a huge deal. But then she tried snowboarding, and then she was having tons of pain after that. And then it was getting ridiculous where it seemed like it was going to get better, and then it just kept getting worse. So finally, we took her to urgent care, had to get x-rays and a bunch of stuff. And thankfully, nothing was broken, but we got paid for like a sprained ankle. It was like $50. Urgent care visit was $50. And then having an x-ray done was $100. And this was just for one kid. So this year we'll get $400 from this benefit. It only cost us $144. Having a high deductible medical plan and having a bunch of kids doing sports, collision, high risk activities like mountain biking, my kids doing downhill mountain biking, it makes sense. I think it makes sense for us to have that. The amount of money, it's not providing me money I really need, but the fact that I can upload this stuff and process the reimbursement at work, because it's an employer benefit, I think it's probably worth it. So I keep it. It helps offset some of those high deductibles, and even just the health screening benefit pays for it. So it's not like I'm paying a ton of money and not getting anything in return. But like I said, there is a good chance, you pay for this kind of stuff, you never use it, you forget to do the health screening benefit, and it's like $50, it pencils out. But, it's like $50 doesn't light a fire under your butt to get it done either. So pet insurance, this is really going to depend on the person. I've never carried pet insurance. And when you think about it, if you had a pet and you go see the veterinarian, it's completely different from the human experience with healthcare. It's not like you show up at the doctor's office and they're like, oh, I'm sure your insurance will cover it. Or it's like, oh, you don't have insurance? Well, we're going to charge you, 10 times the insurance rate, and you're just going to totally get screwed. Send you bills like months, years later. So every time I've taken my pet to the vet, they can tell me exactly how much it's going to cost. They provide multiple different treatment plans. And if it's catastrophic, you don't have to treat it, or they can do palliative hospice care essentially, or, euthanize. Pet healthcare is completely different from human healthcare. And so what I've found is, there's a chance my pet could have a catastrophic issue and might need like an emergent surgery, which would be pretty darn expensive. It would. And insurance would help cover that. That's pretty unlikely. But I do know people who've had to pay like a $10,000 emergent surgery fee for their dog. And so with pet insurance, probably the most compelling thing I've heard for why you might want it is it kind of takes that whole discussion out of the equation potentially. And instead of being like, how much do I really like my doggy, or 10 grand's a no-brainer for your dog, but your cat, they like the cat, but you know how cats can be. So they're not quite as friendly as dogs. So rather than deciding, should I save my pet and pony up the money, it just kind of eliminates that equation, and you have an insurance benefit. It can be costly. It depends on the person and their approach. But for me, I've got a cat, and we've paid a couple $1,000s the last few years for some issues that our cat had. And it's totally worth it to pay for the cat. And the difference is I knew exactly how much it was going to cost me. I'm at the vet. They're giving me a breakdown, multiple treatment options. It's not like I'm just going in with my fingers crossed, and then I'm getting a vet bill for $10,000 a year and a half later after they told me, no, I'm sure it'll be fine. It won't cost that much. It won't be a big deal. You should just definitely get it all done. Whereas if a human goes in and can get potentially totally screwed if they don't have medical insurance. So totally different thing. And through your employer, it might be worth getting because you might be able to get a group discount. Or it could just be a really gimmicky thing. But that's the most compelling argument I think I've heard for pet insurance is it eliminates that whole discussion of, can I afford to pay for this expensive thing for my pet? That's potentially valuable. And then ID theft protection. I don't carry that. I use a password manager. I'm really careful with my passwords. I have good online account hygiene and whatnot. I don't think that identity theft is really necessary. I feel like I'm sufficiently protected from fraudulent charges and things through all my banks and the way I do my finances. That's one of those things that can be considered gimmicky. It's something you can definitely get outside of open enrollment. So it's not like if you regretted not having it, you could get it outside. And that's true of the pet insurance too. The other thing I've considered doing in open enrollment is getting legal protection. I mean, if you've ever interacted with lawyers are expensive. The idea legal stuff, can be kind of scary, how much it could cost. So when I did kind of a deep dive on legal, I want to get a will in place. I've been overdue for that. Want to do some estate planning. My wife and I, we got kids. Want to make sure we had all the legal stuff lined up in case something happened to us and our kids taken care of. And so what I found was there wasn't anybody anywhere close by that one would do a will for free. The thing was going to cost me like $300 a year for this legal service. And then what I found was most of the lawyers just did a discount, like a 15% discount. What's 15% when you're potentially paying lawyers $300 to $500 an hour? The nature of legal stuff is the lawyer is going to be specialized. You're not going to want a tax planning attorney to represent you criminally. You know what I mean? Like, because the tax planning attorney is on the discounted plan that you're part of. So I felt like it was pretty unlikely I would ever get any benefit from it. And then, interestingly, I wound up paying $900, my wife and I, to go meet with a lawyer and a will package done. And if we had had the insurance, it would have saved us 15% off that $900, but it would have cost us over $300 to have the plan in the first place. So basically, it would have just cost us more money. If you know for a fact that you can get a good will and good legal counseling for something like that, then yeah, it might be worth paying $300. Because like I said, I paid $900. If I had been able to get the same quality of service and final outcome, the will and stuff, and my trust questions answered for $300 versus $900, like, yeah, that'd be a pretty good deal. The problem is I don't think it's that simple. And it's one of those things where it feels gimmicky to me. Even if I had had it, it would have cost me more than I would have benefited from it anyways. So that's pretty much everything that I'm doing and how I think about open enrollment. I have some specific lessons that really break down the difference between these things. We can really visualize the tax savings. I've got more information on my blog. But if you really want to become an expert on all this kind of stuff and really understand how to make better financial decisions and optimize so you don't have to work extra shifts, so you don't have to be stressed out about your finances, so you don't have to pay thousands of dollars in additional income taxes, and you can have special accounts set up to offset your medical costs, your childcare costs, and whatnot. I have lessons on those, and as a ANCC approved provider, my nursing education is accredited, meaning you probably have employer education funds and hours. You could get paid by the hour by your employer and get contact hours towards your license or your maintaining your specialty certifications to get paid to learn and do all this stuff. So totally worth it. And I hope you enjoyed the show today. And I hope you'll take action. So probably one of the smartest things you can do in preparation for open enrollment is go through your employer's documents, understand the ins and outs of these things before the clock starts ticking, before you've got 2 weeks. And then really look at what do I need, what I don't need, think about it, and am I getting catastrophic protection or am I giving relatively minor protection for something that's unlikely to happen? And are you over-insuring? Are you under-insuring? Are you protecting your family? Are you protecting yourself? Are you protecting your income? These are all questions that should be answered before you go into open enrollment. So that way you aren't stuck with a lousy set of decisions or you're paying more money than you need to for things you're unlikely to benefit from. Make a plan and educate yourself before your open enrollment period starts. Typically, this is in November for most employers, as far as I'm aware. Mine's always been 2 weeks in November. And so that's about a month away. So get smart now. And like I said, I hope you take advantage of some of our accredited education. If you would leave a review for the show, greatly appreciate it. This show is about helping nurses make better financial decisions and living better lives and getting the most out of their careers. So the more nurses who are rating the show and spreading the word about it, the more nurses we can actually help. And also, if you subscribe to our email list, that'll get you exclusive discounts on our courses. Plus, we have a bunch of free courses and a starter kit that you can get access to start improving your finances today. Thanks so much for listening. Have a good day.